Well everyone, it is Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we have to talk about how there are finally some lease deals that are coming back and how these lease deals are going to get even better as time goes on. Before we get in this video though, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And then if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Let's get into it. So before we talk about these lease deals, we have to quickly talk about what leasing actually is. So if you go into a dealership and pay cash for a car, you own the car outright. If you go into a dealership and you finance a car, well, the bank owns it until you pay it off, and then you own the car outright. If you go into a dealership and lease a car, well, you're basically renting it for a set time period with a set mileage amount allotted over that time period. And then once that lease ends, well, in the past, you had the choice of, trading in the lease if you wanted. You could just straight up turn it in to the leasing company. You could also sell it if you wanted, or you could buy out the lease. But in today's world, post-pandemic, that doesn't really happen anymore. Leasing companies basically force customers to just turn in the cars. And if you're wondering why leasing companies want to do this, it's because they want to have more control over the value of the vehicles that they're leasing. And then on top of that, well, we've seen used car prices come down quite a bit over the last year, but before that, we saw them go up by like 50%. And so these leasing companies know that they can cash out and make a ton of money off of these cars if they're able to basically get it from the customer at the set residual value. And so leasing has kind of gone from a different way to buy a car or, just test out a car to you're just testing out a car. You're basically just renting a car for an extended time period. And that is something that you definitely need to shift in your mentality if you're going into a lease. And I think this is very important because when I sold cars, I would talk to customers about leases and explain that, for some people it could make sense to basically lease a car to then buy it out at the end. Whereas now, in today's world, since it doesn't happen anymore, it's just a different way to, I guess, have a car ownership experience. But anyways, now that that is out of the way, let's talk about the lease deals that are starting to pop up, and some of them are actually very appealing. So the one that you've probably heard the most about is with the new Nissan Frontier. So you can literally lease like a fully loaded Frontier Pro 4X, which is like a $46,000 truck, for somewhere around $400 a month. Now, this doesn't take into account tax, title, license, all the other, state fees that you'll typically have with a vehicle that'll obviously get rolled into the lease payment and increase the payment. But still, brand new pickup truck that is in the mid $40,000 range for $400 and something a month after tax, title, licensing, and everything. That's pretty amazing. Now, if you're wondering how Nissan is accomplishing this, they're setting the residual value on these Frontiers extremely high, like in the 90% range. And so it basically is making it so that the payment's going to be really small because you're only paying down to a really, you're paying basically down to a really high residual value because Nissan assumes that the Frontier is going to hold its value well enough that, they're going to be okay at the end of the lease when they, ultimately take the lease from you. And then another lease deal that I've seen recently is with like the BMW 3 Series. This one, I guess, isn't as attractive as the Frontier, but it's still pretty decent. And with the BMW 3 Series, it's like 500 something bucks a month with a few $1,000s down, which again doesn't sound all that appealing on the surface, but this is the first time that there has been a lease on a luxury car in the last few years that has actually been a lower payment than the traditional finance payment on that same luxury car. And so it looks like the market's kind of trending towards a certain direction, and that's what I want to talk about now. And I should mention that there are more cars other than just those two that have decent leases on them right now, but I don't want this video to be 20 minutes of me naming individual cars and what their lease deals are. I just thought I'd use those two examples for this video. Just research the lease on the car that you're looking at purchasing if you're looking at purchasing a brand new car, just to see if it actually makes sense. And again, always make sure to read those contract terms so you know what you're getting yourself into. But anyways, the market is definitely starting to push more towards being a lease-friendly market. Again, over the last few years, leases haven't made sense whatsoever. If you went in and ran the lease numbers on pretty much any new vehicle, then what you would find is that you would have to put more money down to most likely have a payment that is as much as a traditional finance payment, or sometimes, in most cases, even more than a traditional finance payment. And so for the average consumer, it just didn't make sense to lease. Why would you pay more per month on a car if you're not going to own it at the end, right? The only group of people that seem to still be leasing over the last few years is mostly been business owners, because if you don't know, if you use a vehicle for business purposes and you lease it, well, you can write off the entire lease payment. And this is great for business owners that are purchasing vehicles that don't qualify for Section 179, where the vehicle has a gross vehicle weight rating of over 6,000 pounds. So think like, smaller sedans, sports cars, any of that kind of stuff. Those don't qualify for the, Section 179, so you can't write off the entire vehicle. And so if you can't do that, then the next best thing is to lease the vehicle, so then you can write off the entire payment. So any amount of money you're putting into the vehicle is a tax write-off for the business. But aside from that group of people, with regular consumers, you just don't really see leasing anymore, because it just didn't make sense. However, with the current car market environment that we're experiencing, and frankly, the current economy that we're experiencing, leasing is going to be a lot more appealing, not only to consumers, but also to automakers. From an automaker perspective, well, we are finally starting to see new car supplies build up quite substantially. And so if automakers want to get rid of these new cars, they're going to have to incentivize them. Now, they could just release some sort of rebate on the vehicle, or they could do a cemented rate where they basically offer a lower rate than what people can get on the open market to incentivize people to buy. But I don't think that that's what automakers are going to want to do with what they're trying to accomplish within the car market. What you have to remember with leases is they're typically pretty short term, whereas with traditional finance in today's world, most people are financing their cars for at least 5 years, and it's more like 6, 7, even 8 years at this point. When I worked at a dealership a few years ago, almost every single customer took out a 7-year loan on a vehicle. It was crazy, and I try to tell people, I'll be like, you should probably do a shorter loan so that you're not going to be crazy upside down, and they'd be like, nope, this is the payment I want, and it's like, okay, well, good luck with that, I suppose. But that is obviously too long of a time frame for automakers. They don't want people to be purchasing a car every 5, 6, 7 years. They want them to be purchasing a car every 2 to 3 years, and that's where most lease terms end up sitting at, is usually in that 24 to 36 month term. And so not only will this help automakers sell more vehicles in the short term, if they release incentives on these leases to make it so the leases are more affordable from a payment perspective, because you have to remember, 85% of people that purchase a car take out a loan. So that means 85% of customers that purchase a car are payment buyers. They're not, total price buyers. So if they make that payment more affordable, they'll attract more customers. And then in 2 to 3 years, those customers will have their lease basically end. And with the lease terms we've been seeing recently, where you have to turn it in, that'll then force that customer to buy another car and another car. And so then it'll just be this rolling conveyor belt for the automakers to continue to sell cars every 2 to 3 years, which is exactly what they want. Even if they are making less profit per unit, if they're selling more units, then that's just a win for them overall. Now, from a consumer perspective, well, when there's a lot of uncertainty about what's happening in the economy, and then what's also going to be happening in the car market in general with resale value, leases can actually be very appealing, because again, if we look at last year, wholesale values on used cars on average declined by over 20%. And this year looks like it's going to be more of the same. And so if you go and, purchase a brand new car or a used car today, then chances are you're going to take a 20% hit, maybe even more. If it's a brand new car, probably even more, because they already just take a hit once you drive them off the lot. We're going towards that market again. We're not in a market where you can buy a new car and sell it for more than you paid for it. And so leasing could kind of get around this, right? If automakers are, and I'm just going to use this term because we're just going to go with it. If automakers are dumb enough to basically offer people leases where they're setting residual values that are extremely high, then I think it's a thing that consumers should frankly just take advantage of. And again, I'll use the Frontier as an example. I think that truck will hold its value pretty well because, well, mid-sized trucks historically hold their value pretty well, and it's a reliable mid-sized truck. Say whatever you will about Nissan, but the Frontier, with the new powertrain setup that it has, a 9-speed automatic and that 3.8 liter V6, it's a pretty reliable pickup truck. And so it should hold its value pretty well, but I don't think it's going to hold its value as well as what Nissan has the lease term set at. And so this is one of those things where consumers can kind of get around the depreciation that we're going to experience. And so maybe, a lot of consumers would be better off by leasing a vehicle for the next 2 to 3 years while the economy and while the car market figures itself out. So then you don't put yourself in a situation where you go and buy, I don't know, a $40,000, $50,000 vehicle and then find out that in 2 to 3 years it's worth $20,000 or less, because it seems like that's just what the car market's doing right now. So to summarize, leasing is a tool that consumers can use to basically get an extended rental on a vehicle. And it's obviously a tool that manufacturers can use to attract more customers to purchase their new product and kind of start that, conveyor belt of customers purchasing vehicles every few years. And I think that this is something that can definitely be a win-win situation. I mean, in the past when I worked in sales, it was something that a lot of people absolutely loved, because again, you get a brand new car every few years, a payment that you can afford, and understand that there are going to be people that are going to say, well, that's stupid because you're always going to be making car payments. And you are correct with that. It's someone that is consistently leasing will always be making a car payment. But if that person is into cars that aren't necessarily the most reliable, then, well, at least they're making a payment on something new every few years rather than making a payment in the form of maintenance costs on those vehicles, especially like with the new cars that we have with how much tech they have. I think that we're actually, once things normalize in the market, once these leasing rates get even more aggressive, I think we're going to see quite a bit more leasing, because I review cars for a living, and like half the stuff I see in vehicles, I'm like, there's no way this is going to be working in the next 5 to 10 years. Like half of this stuff is just going to be completely broken. And the cost to replace things with vehicles now is just absolutely insane. I mean, you guys know I have a few vehicles that, some of them are crazy, some of them are not, but I have a Wrangler that I just had to replace the windshield with. And it was like over $1,000 for just a windshield. And then my Ram TRX that I just sold, that also needed a new windshield as well. Now, I didn't replace it. I sold it as is without a windshield. And I found out that a new windshield in that truck is like almost $2,000 because of the tech that's integrated in that windshield with adaptive cruise control and everything. And so, yeah, the cost of everything is just astronomical. And so, like, for some people with the cars that they're going after, yeah, leasing can definitely be very appealing for them. But I'm diving a little bit too much into the rabbit hole. I see this overall as a net positive for the market, because I think that this is going to bring more people back into the car market, which will ultimately allow automakers to sell more vehicles. And I think that it will actually help basically put the used car market in the place that it should be from a value perspective, because this will be pulling buyers out of looking at used cars and into new cars again, because most buyers, 85% of buyers, are payment buyers. They're not cash buyers. And so I think that that's a net positive. And then also the other thing is, if people are focused on leasing over the next couple of years while the car market figures itself out, all of these people will be people that won't be buried in their cars, because it's a lease. They can just turn it in. If this group of people instead did traditional financing with cars, and then the car market slid another 20% this year and then 20% the next year, you're looking at a huge group of people that'll be just absolutely buried. And so I think this could be just a really good thing for the overall market. Let me know what you guys think about leasing in general, and then what you think about manufacturers releasing new lease incentives. Like, are you planning on looking into a lease with everything that's happening, or do you think that it's just throwing money away, because if you lease vehicles consistently, you always have a car payment? Anyways, I'll see you.